Oh, there we go. It looks as though we're live.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. The background for today's broadcast, Bob, is not true. It's not summer yet here in Grandy Bendy.
Well, you know what? If you say it long enough and loud enough, just like in politics, people might believe you.
You're right. You're right. That's exactly the kind of week we've just had, isn't it? We're being told stuff over and over again that we best believe.
Well, that's true. And again, we're coming back to a couple of things on this. Oh, should we? What day is it, and what issue are we at now?
Well, it's Sunday. We're a day late. We were going to be here yesterday, but we had to think
Calm
about,
down.
had to calm down. That's right. It's episode 10,
10. Okay.
10, season 4. It's the 30th of
March.
29th of March. We're
So,
we're just a couple of days away from the big tariff bang.
which could be another one like the Big Bang Theory or the sonic boom theory or some kind of theory. Who knows? But
Yeah,
I guess
yeah.
going back to what we were talking about a couple of days ago, and it's becoming prevalent up here now that people are concerned about voter interference. And it seems to be focusing on the usual gang of suspects: China, Russia, and India. But I think we're forgetting one big one here. The fourth big boogeyman in this whole thing seems to be the United States. And, all you have to do is take a look at some of the recent things that have come out here where, Donald Trump, the president, has all but endorsed Mr. Carney and the Liberal Party. Looking forward to working with them and working out issues and getting tariff things all squared away. But I guess the question would be, what would happen to all those nice, kind words that President Trump has said if, gasp, shock, the Conservatives win the election? What happens?
Well, uh, you know, and I know that we've had 100 years of good relations with the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even if we were to suddenly decide that maybe we need to diversify our trade relationships with the US by going elsewhere to sell and buy our stuff, it would take probably a decade or two. You and I would never see it
No.
come to fruition.
Well, we
Uh,
might, but we'd forget about the next morning, so it would be
yeah,
okay.
exactly. So it's really rather bizarre that something that, for example, this government that was wanting to be elected for a fourth term in Canada hasn't done anything about for 10 years. And suddenly the light goes off and now they want to diversify. For what reason do they want to
I,
diversify?
I think the simple answer to that is that it's a hot button issue, and that's their knee-jerk reaction. And if they are elected to a fourth term, it will go back to the status quo, the way it was before. And the carbon tax that was supposedly set to zero, although I have yet to see any impact of that in my neck of the woods on the price of gas and the tea and
It's actually
price of
gone
tea in
up here.
China. Uh, the tax legislation for carbon is still on the books.
Exactly.
And come the 27th, when in fact if they do get their fourth term, um, they can conveniently forget that they signed away a thing that said that it would be going down to zero. But the legislation will still be there, and they can start putting on the taxes again. It's smoke and mirrors. Again, one of those things like we always say, here's watch what's going on, but don't look at my left hand. It's
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. This has been a very muddled week. 2 days ago I was angry, I think would be the best way. And it's a good thing we didn't actually do our broadcast that day, because I was just,
I think when we were doing our pre-production, we were becoming almost like the general populace, running around with our hair on fire. And
yes,
in reality, it wasn't. Uh,
exactly.
Cooler heads,
Exactly.
I think, have prevailed now, and we can look back at that and maybe laugh at our antics. And
Well, no, but let's face it, the inconsistencies, which in brackets I would say are lies, because truth is the first victim in an
Mhm.
election. It's killed off, and then
Yeah,
we have lies and other
other forms of manipulation.
sure, I mean, in recent years, they invented the terms misinformation, disinformation, and blah, blah, blah. Really, it means you're misleading.
Mhm.
Okay. You tell a half truth, or you basically tell a lie. And if you tell the lie enough times, it becomes the truth. And that's an old adage going back,
Well, that's
to,
the premise behind 1984, isn't it? George
yes.
Orwell.
Well, also, Joseph Goebbels,
Mhm.
that, that fellow from another era, said that, and the same with another contemporary of his, who was big on sloganeering. He said, if you have the useful idiots, you tell them stuff. They're perfect for getting your way. The useful idiots. That's the communist approach.
Mhm.
Garner the useful idiots around you, and they'll follow whatever you tell them. But look, we saw the Liberal candidate Carney stand up on stage one day this past week and say that our relationship, that is Canada's, with the United States, historically, militarily, economically, was over. Okay, I'm paraphrasing a little bit. Basically, he slammed the door on what 100 years of relationships between Canada and the U.S. has, benefited both countries, particularly Canada, because
Mhm.
we're the smaller partner. And you just kind of watch that and go, wow, okay, this really is like throwing a Molotov cocktail into the Oval Office. Uh, this man, Orange Man, bad man, is not going to like this, because we have widespread Trump derangement syndrome in this country, particularly being banged about by the left, and even in the conservative halls, Orange Man bad. Okay, so CDS widely saturating the airways and widely accepted in the community. So the following day, after hearing that, and you go, wow, there's a
All of a sudden, there's
conversation.
this miraculous phone call.
It's a phone call. Yeah. And the gist of that is, Mark, everything's okay, bud. You know, uh, as soon as
I'm
this,
looking forward to working with you.
yeah, once this election stuff is over, we'll work it out for both of us. It'll be just Jim Dandy. And thanks for looking at that. Okay, again, a little paraphrasing there, and you're going,
Well, yeah,
whoa.
a little paraphrasing, but and I guess I can't help but think the left-wing media, if that had been a pretend phone call between the conservative leader and the president, it would be on the airways 24 hours a day, 7 days a week,
Indeed.
right up until the election, on how the conservative leader is in bed with the president of the United States, and they're going to sell us down the river, and we've told you this, and all you have to do is look at our attack ads, and it's going to come true.
Yep.
But all of a sudden now, that's just all evaporated. I have yet to hear anything negative on the airwaves over the last 48 hours about the big boogeyman and the
Yep.
tariff machine. You know what I
Yep.
mean? It's just,
Trump derangement syndrome has disappeared
well, it
overnight.
is, and
It's
and
like a vaccine.
it goes back to what you said before many times. The attention span of a goldfish. People have forgotten that the United States was our friend, which it almost fits right back into George Orwell's. We've never been at war with Eurasia. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, we've always been at war with Eurasia. It just, people just, either they don't care, which kind of fits with our trade policy. Well, we don't have to worry about that because, my neighbor says that women are going to lose the vote. So obviously women are going to lose the vote.
Oh yeah, that's I was telling you earlier that that's one of the rumors going around in southwestern Ontario, that the Trump Carney team is, sorry, the Trump Poilievre team. For some reason, there's a link between Poilievre and Trump, which I've yet to figure out. But they're anti-woman, and the vote of women is going to be taken away. And what the devil are you talking about? Where are you getting this stuff? So it's clear that there's a whole lot of misleading gobbledygook that a good percentage, and then this particular ridiculous rumor is going around in the boomer community, which is very much for some reason, at least according to the media. So I have to be cognizant of the fact that the media just got $600 million from the federal government of Canada in a subsidy. So, they will tell you all kinds of stuff, won't they? The truth and the lies and the misleading, somewhere in between those three ideas. Because if I'm beholden to the government of Canada to pay my mortgage, I'm not going to say bad things about the government of Canada.
Well, and again, too, there's the culture minister who really isn't the culture minister because there isn't a government, but saying when they get back, one of the first things that she is going to do is enact legislation to ensure that the CBC will become an act that will be fully funded to the tune of $4 billion. Now, do you believe anything that comes out of the mouth of the CBC, never knowing they're going to get this?
No. I mean, that would be equivalent to Prov to Canada at that point. It was not far off now. Mm-hmm. We've had some skirmishes between the Liberal Prime Minister, unelected at the moment, and the CBC. A couple of journalists have had a little buffeting about in this first week, but I don't think has done much damage to the love affair between the Liberal Party and the CBC. No. I think it's basically a little bit of a grit tossed in there to make it look like they're fair and balanced, to take a page out of the motto of Fox News in the U.S. But there's nothing fair or balanced about the CBC because it is the national state broadcaster. You can dress it up any way you like. It is what it is, and the viewership, the listenership, compared to independent media or even independent radio or TV, as much as it can be independent, since they also get a slice of the subsidy, is telling. But this past week has been really a roller coaster emotionally, I think, for political wonks like myself, because some of the stuff is unbelievable. You say this can't possibly be true. Who would make up such a story?
You don't have to have any truth in this at all. Like I said, you just throw things out there, and if you throw it out long enough and hard enough and fast enough, and the old PBS series, The Newsroom, right? Well, geez, it's kind of dying, and I guess, well, it's not a news story then because it didn't go the full 72-hour news cycle, so let's throw something else out there along the same lines, but let's throw something else out there and see if that ball of jelly will stick to the wall. Maybe I'm becoming jaded. Perhaps I am jaded. Perhaps I always was jaded. I don't know.
Well, I mean, in your neck of the woods, you just had Poilievre, the Conservative candidate. He attracted one hell of a crowd in Surrey, which is supposed to be NDP country, right? And was that reported particularly in the press?
Wide coverage? No, not at all. It wasn't.
Yeah. So anyway, it's curious that at the moment we have a banker, an investment manager, hedge fund manager, and a real estate tycoon who seem to be finding common cause here. You know, and the gaslighting we got one day about the relationship is over and the next day everything is hunky dory really plays into kind of the gaslighting mind games that we're witnessing. And you go, all right, what the hell is the truth here? Who really is looking after the interests of Canada during this election, and what is the final outcome? Because look, I'll be honest, just like we're in pre-production. If Carney's role is to sell out Canada to the U.S. in the sense that we would end up with a economic union, okay, forget all this Pollyanna stuff about the European Union and China and whatever. You strengthen the North-South economic and military relationship. You retain the maple leaf on the pole. You still get to vote at the UN. But essentially, it's like Austria is to Germany. You're part of the same economic setup. There's free access back and forth across the border, and everybody does as well as they possibly can in a competitive economic arena. If Carney does that, great. If Poilievre does that, great. Because I do not buy any of this other nonsense that's being sold, wholesale about how we're going to do this and do that and build up the military and have relationships with 120 other countries around the world. And it's not going to happen. Okay, geography plays against it. History plays against it. The social fiber that children of a common mother, as that arch over not far from where you live says, this is the reality. This other stuff that Carney has spent far too much time, I think, wandering around in the elite stratosphere of the European Union, and basically I don't think he's been in a grocery store in this country to know what it's like, or bought gas for his car in 10 years. So we don't have any relationship with the other side of the world. Okay, and the boogeyman is if he's suddenly going to be embracing if suddenly the hedge fund manager embraces the real estate tycoon, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, that, in the fact, over the last 10 years in particular, with the government that's led us into this pit, we would have a hard time building a pipeline from anywhere in central Canada to the west coast, because it would have to go through too many treaty nations to be ratified. We can't go from that same area to the east coast because we have to go through that independent country within a country who says you can't put pipelines through our territory. Now, I think you mentioned something the other day about not eminent domain.
Yes. Well, I know where you're going. So, breaking news, because most Canadians have never heard this.
Government just say, well, the Trans-Canada Highway is Canada, and we will do what's best for Canada, so we'll put a pipeline down the middle of the Trans-Canada Highway.
Yeah, well, eminent domain, particularly in the case of the U.S., 2 weeks ago, Orange Man, the person that has had all this TDS in Canada, said to the governor of New York State, he's going to build a pipeline from Pennsylvania through New York State to serve New England that at the moment hasn't got access to natural gas and oil, because they are dependent on ships bringing in fuel that is then refined and made into diesel fuel, which is basically heating fuel, which most of New England heats their houses with and drives their cars with. Because if there was a pipeline that went across Quebec into New Brunswick, guess what? We could we could, just add some more pipe and sell to Vermont and Maine and Massachusetts and so forth. Well, I'm pretty sure that President Trump has figured out, I'm going to block this right now. And he told Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, if you don't want to do it, I will impose the eminent domain approach legally, and I will build a pipeline from Pennsylvania, and we will provide gas for New England. Now, the reverse of that is, while we're building that pipeline into Vermont and Maine, how would New Brunswick and Nova Scotia like some of that gas? Duh.
Mm-hmm.
Checkmate. This has not been reported widely in Canada, but for our Canadian listeners, viewers, you might want to take a look at the American news, because that happened 2 weeks ago. And you can talk about pipelines into to Halifax. It'll take 10 years to get there. By the time you do that, they'll already be pumping gas and oil into New Brunswick and Nova Scotia and PEI from Pennsylvania. Because while we're talking about it, this guy's going to do it. So you kind of make you wonder, like, who's meddling with who in this election?
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
in Quebec can say, yeah, I'm not going to have a pipeline here, but I'll be happy to take some of that gas right at the border.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I think we've hit on some salient points, and some good thinking points, some posers, and I think for here in Canada, we've got an awful lot of thinking to do.
Oh, yeah. And we got 4 more weeks of this. I think we're just starting to, the burner's just been turned up a little bit. It hasn't started really percolating.
I would hope that the average Canadian now can get out of their goldfish bowl and start asking pertinent questions to their MP wannabes. And I don't care if you ask the question and the Green candidate gives the best answer for you, then you're going to vote Green, then do that.
Go for it.
But don't just take everybody's word for what's going on, because as you mentioned, we just had to dispel a rumor that women are going to lose the vote.
And I'm sure it doesn't get a lot of traction, but enough of it that they were actually talking about this in this meeting that my daughter attended, and she was flabbergasted that there were all these 70, 80-year-olds that actually believed this nonsense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have to be very aware of the misleading information that's being sent through the political pipeline and spewing out into people's homes and into the schools and into the workplaces. This is nonsense. We need, look, 30% of the population is dumb as a sack of nails anyway, no matter where you are in the world. And that's, and you really only have a small margin of thinking voters. Maybe I would say 20% is at best. The other bunch, of course, already made up their mind. They're going to vote this way or that way. So, to really focus on the wonks in that 20% is where you win the elections. The people who sat around and waited to hear all the information didn't make that decision until they got in the voting booth and put the X on the paper. Never mind all these, bogus polls, and a lot of these are made up. And that's okay. In a democracy, you're allowed to lie. You're not supposed to be allowed to cheat or be corrupt. But as you said earlier, they could promise, for example, to drop the carbon tax, and then when they get elected, yeah, but we didn't mean it like that. It wasn't. We were going to drop it. We're going to call it something else. Hence, it's not dropped. I had some really strange relationships with various corporations, but that was then. And since I'm now in charge, we're not going to open up any hearings on it. So we are at the crossroads, and I think in the end, like we said, if either one of those leading candidates in the parties, just for the sake of argument, take Canada down a much more reasonable route economically and socially with the only neighbor we've got. and reinforces the 100 years of success, because it's not been unsuccessful. This is the part that I don't understand. Why do you want to throw this into the ocean? This has been a very successful relationship. Okay, what we have now is a guy who says, I'm here to make it even better for my people. And you guys are going to be either collateral damage or you can be part of the win. Okay. And so on the 2nd of April, when these tariffs come down, a real interesting thing that for us will be to see what is the actual reaction of the unelected government we currently have when those tariffs are spewed out by the Trump administration. Because if we start seeing carve-outs all over the place, and if we are to take that email or that posting that Trump posted about we can get along just fine with you after the election, I think it'll be telling to see what parts of that agreement really don't mean 25%. And you point out in pre-production that some of those parts, for example, made in the States, not going to tariff their own parts just because they go back and forth in some transmission or like really this is the auto industry we're talking about at the moment. Okay, and I guarantee, as you and I are talking right now, that the president was talking to the CEOs of the big three, and they said to him, Don, some of this really doesn't make a lot of sense. Because that's how the big boys talk to each other. All right. Just as when the president said, Mark and I had a good discussion. Per Mark, not the prime minister. He called him Mark. So you know that there is a whole other kind of discussion that took place. And that's the tell I get from the president's Oval Office news conference. Okay, when he starts talking about Mark, there's going to be something else happening on the 2nd. And the response from Mark on those tariffs will also give us indication of just exactly what direction we're going in. So a week from now, we'll be able to follow up on
maybe it'll be the 3rd.
Maybe the 3rd. Let's see. I think, though, that we have to be calm, like you said, just sit back. Let's not set our hair on fire. It'll work out. I really do not believe for a minute that there is a sudden shift in Canadian economic and social foundations to suddenly become attached to Asia or attached to Europe or Africa. Forget that. This is we can do some of that over time. A little diversification would be good.
Just we have to look at that a bit, but
yeah. But just like we don't grow oranges in this country, we can't suddenly turn around and have relationships with countries that have no political, economic, or cultural attachment to us. This is not trade relies a great deal on being able to understand your partner and have shared values. The vast majority of the countries that Mr. Carney's talking about that we should get in bed with don't share our values. No. Not even in the European Union, I might add.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I think we have to be calm.
That old adage of time will tell is very telling.
Exactly, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to stick with our slow, cumbersome investigation of the facts, and then
facts. Yes.
Facts,
as they used to say on that old TV show. Just the facts, man. Just the facts.
That's right. All right, we hit the 30-minute mark, bud.
All right,
we did it.
We did. Ho ho! So I guess we better say to our viewers, thanks for listening. If you like us, hit that like button.
Subscribe. Tell your friends to subscribe.
And, if by chance you really have some umbrage with what we were saying, let us know. Or if you agree with us, let us know. We'd
And one other thing, perhaps we could ask for some help because we're having some screwy things happening with our webpage. Maybe someone could let us know how we might fix that. Yeah. Because we're finding our shoestring budget isn't enough to make our webpage work.
Well, that, and we're not exactly Luddites, but we're close.
Yes. All right. Well, you have a good week, Bob.
And you too.
And
enjoy
we'll
your sunny day. We shall see.
Indeed. So said the blind man to the deaf dog.